Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into something truly fascinating, the male reproductive system. But we're not just going to read textbook definitions. No, we're going to look at this as an incredibly efficient, microscopic manufacturing plant. Seriously, it's got an assembly line, chemical packaging departments, and a super strict upper management team running the whole show. It's an absolutely amazing biological process, and I am so excited to unpack it with you. All right, here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the basics of human reproduction, then head to the testes, our sperm factory. After that, we'll track the duct transport system, check out the glands and semen production, and finally wrap up with hormones and vasectomies. Let's get into it. Part 1, Basics of Human Reproduction. So, I want you to think about this. What is truly needed to create a human child? Now, I know the simple, everyday answer is just a male and a female. But biologically speaking, that's not exactly hitting the nail on the head. Just having the physical presence of a male and a female body doesn't actually create life. The real biological reality here is that you absolutely need gametes. The non-negotiable requirement for creating a zygote, and eventually an embryo, is the fusion of two very specific microscopic cells. We're talking about the male gamete, which is the sperm, and the female gamete, the ovum or egg. If the male body isn't manufacturing sperm or the female body isn't releasing an egg, reproduction simply cannot happen. It is all about those gametes. Now, to really make our factory analogy work, we've got to separate the actual manufacturing machines from the shipping logistics, right? In the reproductive system, we divide things into primary and secondary organs. The primary organs are absolutely essential. They're the ones literally on the factory floor manufacturing the gametes. The secondary organs? Well, they're kind of like your shipping trucks and packaging departments. They don't actually make the product, they just make sure it safely gets to where it needs to go. Moving right along to Part 2, Testes, the sperm factory. Have you ever actually wondered why the testes are located outside the main body cavity in a pouch called the scrotum? Well, it is all about strict temperature control. You see, the internal human body temperature hovers around 37 degrees Celsius. But this biological factory, it is incredibly demanding. It flat out refuses to manufacture sperm at that heat. To get the job done right, the testes require a working environment that is exactly 2 to 3 degrees Celsius cooler than the rest of the body. So the scrotum acts like a smart climate control system. It shrinks in the cold to bring the testes closer to the body's warmth and expands in the heat to cool things down. Pretty clever, right? Let's zoom in on the microscopic machinery operating inside this factory floor. If we were to slice open a single testis, it's not just empty space in there. Nope. It's highly compartmentalized into roughly 200 to 250 tiny sections called testicular lobules. Think of them as individual production rooms. And inside each of those rooms, you'll find 2 to 3 incredibly coiled tubes called seminiferous tubules. This, my friends, is the exact location where the microscopic magic of sperm creation literally happens. Now, inside this factory, there's a super strict division of labor. We've got 3 specific types of cells working tirelessly around those tubules. First up are the spermatogenic cells. These are your actual assembly line workers actively manufacturing the sperm. Right alongside them are the Sertoli cells. Their only job is to cater to the new guys, basically feeding and nourishing the developing sperm cells. And finally, hanging out in the empty spaces just outside the tubules, we have the Leydig cells. These are absolutely vital because they pump out testosterone, the crucial male sex hormone that drives this entire operation. All right, Part 3, the duct transport system. So once the product, the sperm, is manufactured, it can't just sit around in the factory forever. It needs an assembly line to travel on. It starts its journey right where it's made, in the seminiferous tubules. From there, it gets pushed into a tiny network called the retake testis. Next, it travels through these microscopic ducts called the vasa efferentia. Think of those as the exit doors of the testes. This leads directly into the epididymis, and eventually, when it's time for shipping, it shoots up a long tube called the vas deferens. I actually want to pause and focus on the epididymis for a second. This little structure sits right on the back half of the testis. And get this, if you were to uncoil this microscopic tube, it would stretch a staggering 6 meters long. I mean, that's wild. This is basically the holding zone. When sperm arrive here, they're brand new, but they aren't fully ready yet. In the epididymis, they get stored, they mature, and they essentially find their motivation and mobility before they're finally shipped out. Which brings us to Part 4, glands and semen production. Let's check out the packaging and shipping department.
You see, sperm cannot travel alone. They're like little tadpoles. They have tails to swim, but they absolutely cannot swim on dry land. They need a specialized liquid medium, which is where semen comes in. And this might actually surprise you. Sperm make up a really small percentage of semen, only about 10%. The rest of this liquid packaging comes from glands. About 60% of it comes from the seminal vesicles, and roughly 20% is from the prostate gland. Together, all these fluids mix to create semen, providing the ultimate transport vehicle.
Every single one of these three glands adds something totally vital for the sperm's survival. The seminal vesicles toss in this yellowish alkaline fluid that is just packed with fructose, basically sugar, to give the swimming sperm a huge burst of energy. Then, the prostate gland adds a milky, slightly acidic fluid that activates the sperm and gives them even more nourishment. And finally, there's the tiny Cowper's gland, sometimes called the bulbourethral gland. It releases a clear, alkaline fluid right before ejaculation. To really grasp why that Cowper's gland is so incredibly important, we have to look at the urethra. In the male reproductive system, the urethra does double duty. It's the single exit pathway out of the body for both urine and semen. But here's the massive problem. Urine is highly acidic, and that acid is literally lethal to sperm. That's why the neutralizing alkaline fluid from the Cowper's gland is an absolute lifesaver. It flushes and cleans the urethra, wiping out any leftover drops of acidic urine, and paves a completely safe, lubricated highway for the semen to follow. And that leads us to our final section, Part 5, Hormonal Control and Vasectomy. Let's take a look at the upper management that kickstarts this entire factory. It is a fascinating chain reaction that actually starts way up in the brain. The hypothalamus acts as the CEO, releasing a hormone called GnRH. That signal goes straight to the pituitary gland, the middle manager, telling it to release two more hormones, LH and FSH. These travel all the way down the body to the testes. Remember those Leydig cells? Well, LH activates them to start pumping out testosterone. Meanwhile, FSH activates the Sertoli cells so they get ready to nourish the incoming sperm. It is just a perfect cascading communication system.
Now, what if someone wants to shut down reproduction permanently? Well, that brings us to the vasectomy, a very common permanent birth control method. Remember that long shipping duct we talked about, the vas deferens that carries sperm from the testes up to the glands? In a vasectomy, a doctor simply cuts and ties off that specific tube. That is literally it. It just cuts the shipping line. The factory itself stays open, the glands still produce fluid, but the sperm are totally blocked from ever leaving, meaning the male and female gametes can never meet.
Which leaves us with this final, kind of mind-boggling question. If a vasectomy blocks the exit, what on earth happens to the millions of microscopic sperm cells that the factory is still tirelessly manufacturing every single day? Well, they travel up the duct, hit the roadblock, and basically just reach the end of their roughly 72-hour lifespan. Once they die, they are harmlessly broken down and reabsorbed by the body. The manufacturing plant keeps running, but the product is completely recycled. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other incredibly complex, microscopic factories are operating silently inside of you right now, perfectly balancing supply and demand without you ever even knowing? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible microscopic tour. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next explainer.